Welcome, and Gunter, I'm really very happy that you took the time also to speak tonight about based on your new book, that what it could mean like an economy of happiness, and to share your ideas and also your real life examples about it.
Okay.
And I told everybody that you just arrived and didn't have a proper rest, so thank you for making this effort and being here. And I will go there now to translate.
Okay. Well, thank you all. And of course, how can we refuse an invitation from Ave? It's impossible. And she and her husband Arno make certain we feel very well at home. And it's good to see you again, Ville. And it's the third time I come here, so there seems to be something about Estonia for coming back. How have you taken care of yourself during the lockdown and the COVID crisis? Were you okay?
In Estonia it was easy because Estonians usually take 5 meters distance,
not 2 meters. So now you were closer to each other than usual. That's a good point. How did you all do? Fine? No one had some breakdowns, some stresses? I was confined for 3 months in Colombia. I was going to Colombia to visit my 3 sons there, who lived there with their mother. And I came there for the birthday of my youngest, who turned 6, and 2 days later the airport was closed. It's still closed, but I was able to escape. But it was quite a unique experience for me for not being able to get out of the house for 3 months. So what happens to someone like me when I can't get out for 3 months? One, I am with the children, which is a fantastic time. They hadn't seen their dad for 3 months, non-stop, morning, evening, etc. But so I start writing, because my mind immediately starts to get to my fingers. And then I kind of need to close my eyes and I start writing. And before I knew it, I had a book that I thought was something great. It talked about happiness. And since I'm an economist, I am kind of always thinking about the economics. So I wrote a book about the economy of happiness. Because I think that we have forgotten that we can create a framework. And if the framework is rightly designed, happiness will emerge. It's like when we design a framework to treat everyone like automated machines, your productivity will go up and suicide as well. But we can design a framework, and somehow economists never ever thought about creating a framework where whatever will come out is happiness and health, because it's very closely related. So I ended up having a book that I had not even planned writing. And I think probably these are the better books. You didn't plan writing them. I didn't plan constructing the thinking in my brain. It was actually what I had been living for now probably 40 years. I'm 64, so I was 24. And I realized that actually so much in my life, I thought it was called blue economy, and I thought it was called, whatever people called it. But actually I realized I had been intuitively chasing happiness and looking for what are the frameworks to create. But then, when I had written the book, I sent it to a few people who criticize. Basically when you write a book, if I may use maybe not appropriate term, it's like a striptease. You undress. Because it's you. You put yourself naked in front of everyone with your ideas. It's like, here I am. No cover-up. And then I received back some comments from friends and said, but why don't you talk about that project in Africa where you've been involved with? I said, oh yeah, that's right. In 1986, I started that project in Africa. And look, and if you look at the project, oh, people seem to be happy there. And then I said, well, what did you do in Colombia? Oh, in Colombia, yeah, I was involved in this project in Colombia. And what is happening there? Well, it's full employment now. Oh, and what happened with this project in Sweden where you were involved with? It's called Rumpan. I don't know if you speak Swedish. None of you. Rumpan means... So how come you were involved in a project where the name of the project is your bum? I mean, this is a bit provocative, isn't it? But apparently people are very happy, and we don't have land anymore to sell to anyone because all the land has been purchased. And so I realized that I had been involved with so many projects around the world, and no one ever said, we will be happy when this succeeds. And somehow, when I look back, since all of them have at least 20, 25 years of track record, it seems like without knowing and wanting and focusing, we create an environment that was very conducive for happiness and health. So I put myself back to the book and wrote 6 cases of those communities and cities around the world where I've been operating. Now, I'm an economist, I warned you, and so I get a bit too structured. It's like we want to do mathematics and we want to do statistics now. So I'm not going to bother you with any of that. My purpose this evening is to share with you some of the framework thinking. Where did it all originated from? Some of the framework thinking, and then I will talk about some of the cases. Is that okay? You have the right to stop me anytime you want. You have the right to question and to have opinions any moment of the presentation. Don't feel you must wait till the end. Okay? You have one danger, that when I start talking, I don't stop. So when it's time to stop, you let me know. Otherwise, I have the danger of continuing, because I get excited about these things. The beauty is that once you have done it and you've seen it's possible and you've moved and you do it again in a very different context, somehow you get used to doing this. And for oneself, it's no magic anymore. It's like, yeah, this is the way it's done. Although when the book was written in its full format, and I sent Ave, I think only 2 weeks ago, Ave, or 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, I sent her the final version. When you look at it, you say, wow, what great to be alive. Well, what a great opportunity this was. I mean, what a gift it was to be able to do it. So where did it all start? Let's start from the beginning. And I don't know if any of you have been to a place called Bhutan. Have you been to Bhutan? Bhutan. Bhutan is this little country in the mountains. And I have to tell you the story. I've been many, many, many times to Bhutan. And Bhutan is a small country that actually was the merger of 4 kingdoms to protect themselves against the aggressive Tibetans. We have a different opinion today of the Tibetans, right? We think they're oppressed by the Chinese. But 100 years ago, Bhutanese kingdom was created because the Tibetans were considered the aggressors. And the Bhutanese made a very pragmatic arrangement. They were going to have a king and their 4 families. So the son of the first king in 1920s had to marry with the daughter of one of the other 3 families. And the second king would marry with the daughter of one of the other 2 families. And the third one would have to marry, hopefully, with the daughter of one of the leftover families. So let's hope they have a daughter. And they had a daughter, but This king at the age of 17 became king at 17 because his father got killed in a safari in Kenya, and he fell in love with a girl that was not part of the four. Can you imagine what a drama it was to the four families that had been planning for four kings? I mean, I'm not telling you a fairy tale. This is a real story. This is not fairy tale. This is real. And so the king negotiated from his 17 to 27 to marry the girl he saw in the window because he thought this was my love. What was the problem? First, the father of that girl in the window was the leader of the opposition. Not a good idea. But second, four sisters. You know what happens. If they carefully planned for the kingdom to be limited to a royal family, to the four families, now there is a girl he wants to marry and has three sisters. That means that there is much more, there is doubling the royal family, and that was too much. He got his deal. What was the deal? Again, this is a real story. This is not a joke. The resolution was he had to marry all four sisters. What a deal. He had to marry all four sisters, and he married. But he was so happy, he finally was able to marry the lady he had seen in the window and he was so much in love with, and she's the only one who could live with him in the log cabin he built. For each of the princesses, now queens, he built a little castle, but he kept them living in his log cabin, and only one could come to his log cabin. For those who are interested, he had children with all of them. But when he was able to achieve what he wanted to do, he said, "This is the happiest day of my life. I want my citizens to be happy as well." And so was born the concept of gross national happiness. Have you heard of that? The Kingdom of Bhutan is the first one in the world that has an index to measure the happiness of the citizens. It's quite amazing. The United Nations has adopted a new version of that and has now also a happiness index. I was in Bhutan when all of that was happening. And so I thought it was amazing that someone who found and was able, under very special circumstances, to marry the love that he had seen, and then decide, I want my citizens to be happy. And I will be measuring my effectiveness as a king by the improvement of the happiness of my citizens. They have 2,000 parameters they check every 2 years. They have 800,000 inhabitants, and every 2 years, 80,000 citizens are questioned. What is your level of happiness? It's quite amazing. The parliament today, because the king abdicated, he stepped back and he had his son take over. The parliament today has the right to stop decisions because it's not contributing to happiness. Can you imagine? So the Parliament of Bhutan decided to become member of the World Trade Organization. And then the commission of 15 people were checking, if we are member of the World Trade Organization, will we be happier, yes or no? Guess what their conclusion was? No. So we don't become member of the World Trade Organization. I mean, talking about democracy, I mean, checking if the decisions of the parliament, which are very often political decisions, are checked against happiness of the people. I mean, it is something that inspired me a lot. And I think if you ever have the chance to go to Bhutan, I've been very privileged to be one of the founders of the Happiness Center of Bhutan in Bumthang. And we actually want to keep the culture of searching for happiness as one of the key things. Now, I give you one example of checking happiness. You know buckwheat. Buckwheat is a fine grain the bitter buckwheat in Bhutan, when you sow it at 3,500 meters altitude, will grow fast and can be harvested in 4 weeks. Talking about happiness as a farmer. I mean, we have some artificial intelligence farming people there, 4 weeks, plant, harvest. But when you harvest, this is Bhutan, you have buckwheat, but if the buckwheat doesn't have enough insects, you don't get your protein, the buckwheat is not so good. So when you make your bread from buckwheat, or you make your breakfast with buckwheat, you must have some insects in there. Because if there are no insects, that means you have used chemicals. Otherwise, there are insects in there. And buckwheat without insects means you don't have your full protein. Happiness is being able to harvest buckwheat with insects. It wouldn't be exactly the same, I think, for the Western farmer. He would be very unhappy to have insects in his. But they have collected all these parameters. My time in Bhutan really taught me to think of the framework. What do we need to look for? And of course, my first reflection on the framework condition is your economy able to respond to the needs of everyone? I mean, if you have an economy that is not able to respond to the basic needs of everyone, you will have unhappy people. And so we think, though, as economists today, that scarcity is a condition for having the market function. Your market must have demand and supply. And if your supply is much higher than your demand, you go bankrupt. That's what happened with petroleum during the COVID. Too much gas, too much energy prices go below 1 for a couple days. You had to pay to actually be able to deliver your oil. That's market and demand. This is, to me, one of the very strange effects, because you expect that the market only functions when there's scarcity. When there's scarcity, that means there are people who don't have the food, the water, the health, the housing. You actually create scarcity, but scarcity means you create unhappiness. How can you be as a mother happy when you know your child does not have the food? Or when your child cannot get the education? Hello. How are you? Good to see you again. So I think this was one of the first things that I learned from Bhutan and in other projects. Am I able to create an environment that responds to the basic needs of all? That means for a whole range of basic needs, I don't want a market, because the market only functions when there's scarcity. Therefore, I think we should have abundance of water. I don't think we should have abundance of agricultural products. I think we should have abundance of healthy nutrition. That means that, for example, we have to change the way we look at food. We don't buy food by the kilogram, but we buy food by the nutrition. I mean, what do you want? A kilo of pork, or do you want fat? No, we don't want fat. So what is happening is that we need to change the way we think about the products and the pricing, because product and pricing determines market and supply. And so if I am saying I'm interested in buying not kilos of food, but I want to buy nutrition that my body needs, I'm changing completely the scarcity. You follow me? How many of you go to a store and say, oh, in this apple I have much more nutrition than in this apple, therefore I'm going to pay 2 times more for this apple? We are brainwashed over decades to think cheap is good. But what we realize, if you have an economy where cheap is good, that means competition is based on being the cheapest. How can you be the cheapest when you're not cutting corners or not taking care of environment? I mean, if you have to be the cheapest in the world, you must exploit some workers. You must damage the environment, because there's no other way you can be the cheapest. If you are the one who is taking care the best way of your workers and the best way of your environment, you're going to be expensive. But do you then have the best nutrition? So we need to change from a two-dimensional, one-dimensional or two-dimensional to a three-dimensional logic. Now, for economists, that's very difficult. You know, for an artist, a sculptor, that's life. But for an economist, for a farmer, he's always thinking in 3 dimensions. But for an economist, we say price per kilo, 2 dimensions. And if you don't add a third dimension like health, you're never going to get to happiness. So you see that our instruments that we're using are instruments that actually force us to not take care of our health. Because I want a coupon to be the cheapest, and I buy this product which is in promotion today in the supermarket. You are not contributing to happiness. You're actually undermining the chance to create an economy that is destined to have happiness. Being the cheapest means you must do damage somewhere. You can't take full care of everything. And this has been one of my challenges as an economist, is how can I now still be competitive while I'm not the cheapest? And that means in an economy of happiness, we will not compete on price, but we will compete on value. How much value do I represent in my product? You know, the value proposition, as they call it in the market economy. What is your value proposition? Well, my value proposition is that your health will be much better if you have more omega-3. But then unfortunately, if I have this pig and I want omega-3, I can't slaughter the pig after 5 months because she will have no omega-3. I have to keep the pig for 13 months because after 13 months she will have omega-3. Just like any body needs to go through a development, and as you age, you have a different chemical composition than when you were younger. So as a result, if I want to be creating an environment for happiness, I have to understand how I leave the competition on price and I focus on the competition on value. And how much more value can I create? And of course, many people say, but we're not willing to pay. We're not going to pay more. Well, that's because we have been framed in 2 dimensions. So the third dimension allows us to really focus on how can we create value and not. That's why we say that in a traditional competitive economy, we are focusing on a core business, one business. We have one value proposition, and we will only do that, and we will focus only on that specific, narrow, defined business proposal. Whereas if you want to create a framework for happiness, you can't focus on one. You have to have multiple value propositions. So that means we're really going straight ahead against the model.
How you can measure the value?
Money. So we will go back, it's economy. Economy, we have some money. So we will come back later to some examples, okay? But so I want to not generate one value proposition with my core business. I want to generate multiple values. I have to leave the core business behind. That means my base is not going to be one, but it's going to look much more like an ecosystem. That means my model is not going to be the biggest, greatest company that is the #1 in the world. No, my model is going to be the smallest, most flexible, most adaptive. And so we're looking much more like an ecosystem, a natural system, than we look like a competitive society. So our inspiration for modeling is going to be nature. I've talked about the whole issue of not being the cheapest, but we have another issue in society which I think very many economists are not taking into account, and that is unemployment. People without a job. You know, Bhutan already stipulated in the beginning that one of the key parameters for happiness is that everyone can contribute all the time to society and will be compensated and rewarded for that. What's the level of unemployment in Europe today? Seen the latest statistics? 14.5%. Spain, 19.5%. What happens then when you look at the 19.5% in Spain, the age group 16 to 26? 75% unemployment. Can you have happiness when in the age group 16 to 26 there is 75% unemployment? I mean, not only the young people are stressed out by not feeling useful in society, their parents will feel that they have failed for their children. So what we have said is that any project we undertake, and on these 5 projects that I will mention, we have done it in all, are one of the single goals is full employment. What do the traditional economists say? Very bad. You can't have full employment. No flexibility on the market. No. I'm not interested in the flexibility of the market. I'm interested in happiness. I'm interested in health, including mental health. And how do you succeed? Well, I again take my master as nature. In nature, how many people are unemployed in the forest? The forest doesn't know unemployment. I mean, it's impossible to put anyone out of a job in a forest. Everyone is always contributing to the best of their abilities. And everyone is always rewarded for doing it. And we will have the mushroom network. I mean, I've written a new fable called The Internet of the Fungus. And the fungus is always looking for information. Oh, you have not enough carbon, you need more carbon. Oh, let me give you some carbon. Give me some sugar, will you please? Give me some sugar, I'll give you carbon. And continuously under the ground, they're trading because they want everyone to have enough carbon. It's fantastic. Everyone is working all the time. And if I'm an oak tree, I will have my network, and I know my son is over there, my daughter is over there. I'm an oak, I know where my kids are. And if need be, I will make a deal with the mushrooms to send much more of my carbon that I have too much as an old tree anyway. I will send them all my carbon. And the mushroom knows who is my child, and they will send it to my child. They will not have the wrong address. You know, so when I look at a natural system, there is this generous trading going on in this intensive communication. Everyone is always contributing all the time in the forest. A grassland, everyone is always contributing in the grassland as well. So when we have an economic system where we suppose that the lowest acceptable unemployment level is 3%, that means we will ensure that there is 3% of the population unhappy, their parents and grandparents are stressed out, so we have 10-12% of the population unhappy because of unemployment. The economic system that we design for happiness must have full employment. And who says those who are in a job cannot change jobs? You know, there are birds flying from here to another forest as well. I mean, you can have migratory birds. Your storks are still flying, right, over down to North Africa. So people can still fly around and migrate if they want to. But to me, the key is the framework of an economy, that's an economy that wants happiness, will focus on full employment. If you don't target full employment, of course, to have full employment, what do you need to do? You need to generate value. Multiple values. If you don't generate multiple values, you can't finance that. Do you have a question?
In Soviet time, in Soviet society, we had all people employed and all people has his role in society, but society was not happy. What do you think, why?
Because they were told what to do. You had no freedom to choose what you were doing. Someone in the party decided what you were doing. Maybe.
In some proportions.
Yes, but I think that it's not the only thing we want is the full employment. It is one of those that we want, right? It's multiple. But if we succeed in focusing on the full employment, we have a project in Colombia, which is called Las Gaviotas. And in Las Gaviotas, we said from the beginning, it's full employment. Why? Because there's so much easy money. Easy money means cocaine. There's so much easy money that anyone who does not have a solid, continuous job will get into the cocaine business. And if you have people who are in the cocaine business, how much happiness do you have? For those who are taking the cocaine, yes. But you see, the challenge that we're having is that in that environment we knew that it was really even our security, is everyone has a meaningful job where they feel they can develop themselves, they can discover their innate interests, they can change their minds on what they want to do in life, you know. And so the job and the employment in our project became key. And when there were immigrants coming, it was our, and it still is our responsibility to imagine what more can we do to give a meaningful job. It's a very big shift from what we're used to, but in Las Gaviotas, Colombia, who knows Las Gaviotas? All right. Who speaks Spanish? Okay. Las Gaviotas. Las Gaviotas. I was first in Las Gaviotas in 1984, a little while ago. You weren't born yet. In 1984, we started regenerating the forest. Why did we decide to regenerate the forest? Not because we were obsessed by carbon sequestration, because in 1984, not many people were talking about carbon sequestration. Our obsession was drinking water. Like I mentioned, we have to start with the basic needs. Drinking water is a basic need. If you don't have drinking water, you have problems with your digestion. That means that if you want to have people with a healthy intestinal system, you need to have drinking water of quality. The only way we could imagine in the region where there was no drinking water to have drinking water was by regenerating the forests. We regenerated the forest, we have the drinking water ever since, because forests generate water. When you have, and I'm summarizing because as I mentioned before, I have the tendency to talk too long. When you have a forest and you have the drinking water, and at the same time, everyone is riding the bicycle instead of any other transport in the region, What happens to a 6-year-old that drinks 2 liters of water fresh from the forest and rides the bicycle all the time? What happens to their health? It improves. Exercising every day and drinking a lot of water is excellent. So what is the result? When we started the project, we built a hospital. We had a big problem. No more patients for the hospital. We had to close the hospital because we had no more patients. This is happiness. This is happiness in reality. I mean, can you imagine? Headline of the newspaper, close down the hospital, people are too healthy. Of course there were still accidents happening, but everyone became a barefoot doctor. Any broken leg, anything that was happening, we knew how to deal with it. Heart surgery, no. We don't know how to do that. But so you have an increased responsibility of all the citizens in taking care, because all basic illnesses that every child and every adult goes through is known by the community, and the community knows how to deal with it. And this is a very important component of happiness, is being able to have sufficient wisdom, experience, and knowledge around that you can take care of only a broken leg. Why would we have to go to the hospital for that when so many people in the community know how to do that? So this to me has been a very important exercise for us, because now we started in '84 and now we're in 2020. That means that's 36 years. We're now in the 3rd generation is coming up in the community. And the 3rd generation coming up in the community that actually knows the hospital is a helicopter away, because we only need it 2 times a year. On average, transfer to hospital is 2 times a year for a community of 10,000 people. Is this happiness? You know, when you have this fundamental knowledge that water generated by a forest with full employment and children having exercise, we have no more diabetes in our region. You know diabetes? How is it in your part of the world? It's increasing. Why? Because we don't move, and we don't drink well, and we don't eat. You know, we know why, but we don't change. Because our framework of life is not conducive for us to do that. And then we have a 3rd element that the economy, the traditional economy, accepts, and that's waste. Again, nature is my master. Nature, where's the waste? You know, nature does not know how to make waste. We know. We are so smart, we can make something no one wants. I mean, this is a very interesting intelligence. I mean, natural systems are incapable of making something no one wants. We know very well how to do that. And so, what we said is waste is actually a sign of arrogance. If I want you, I pay you to take care of my waste. What an arrogant attitude it is. If I know how to take care of my own waste and turn it into food or energy or material that is useful for someone else, I'm a humble person. And we know when there are a couple very arrogant people around, how much is your happiness? Arrogance is not very conducive to happiness. Arrogance creates distance, the 5 meters you were talking about. You don't want to be around an arrogant person. And so what we have seen is in the communities where we are, we don't have waste. And if you don't have the waste anymore, you have no more arrogance. There is a humility that comes automatically by not asking someone to take care of something you have no idea what to do with. You know, this is a switch in our mindset. And of course, that we can regulate, because the forest, again, no waste. There's no recycling. Oh, we're not supposed to say that. Because if you say that recycling is supposed to be the magic today. No. Can you imagine the tree takes its leaves, keeps them in the fall, so that in the spring they can attach them again? I mean, this is recycling. This is what we do with glass. And then we need to subsidize glass, because glass recycling doesn't work. And even when we subsidize it, it still doesn't work. Because it's not the way nature designs. Nature secures that whatever is not useful for you will be useful for me. And I will live close to you so that I don't have to go very far. That's why under a tree you have mushrooms, you have earthworms, you have microorganisms in the soil, so that they are happy. There's just all the leaves falling down. It's very easy. No transport. So when we accept an economy that has an excessive tolerance for waste being wasted, or waste being burned, destroy it. I mean, we do not only know how to make waste, we know how to destroy it with fire. You know, it's a very strange attitude. We don't know what to do with it, and if we don't know what to do with it, we destroy it. You know, ignorance should not be substituted for force. When you don't know what to do, why do you use force? And burning is a typical human force. We know how to make fire. Actually, when you look at our cultural history as human beings, we celebrate the fact that we know how to make fire. I think that not making fire is actually one of the great frameworks for happiness. Because you're going to do something much more intelligent with what you have before you than just burn it. And actually burning means you make it smaller, particularly with city waste, you make it smaller and more toxic. I mean, making smaller and more toxic cannot be a sign of happiness. It's more of a sign, again, of I have the money, I can pay for it, I'm arrogant, and I will impose it on you. So we think that a framework of happiness is a society where we eliminate the concept of waste. Waste doesn't exist. It's not there. So where'd it go? Well, we just eliminated the concept of waste. That doesn't mean there's no leftover. I mean, you know the story of the Romans, right? The Roman emperor, he had the right to collect your urine. Oh yeah, this was a privilege of the emperor. And of course, the emperor had a reason to use it, because it was a disinfectant. They considered urine as a disinfectant, and they knew how to treat it so that it wasn't a disinfectant. But you know, if you don't know what to do with it, then you mix it with something else and you put it into drinking water. I mean, can you imagine how smart it is? I mean, I'm sorry to say it, but you know, for those of you who haven't heard it yet, our body is made in a very unique way. The design is extraordinary. Where there is one exit for liquid and there's another exit for solid. And the first thing we do is mix it with drinking water. Does that make you happy? I mean, who takes care of this? And so what we're realizing is that in the Roman times they had figured it out, and then, you know, someone else came around and they got it a little bit mixed up, and we've forgotten ever since. But you remember the wording, money doesn't smell? Is that a proverb as well in Estonian? Money doesn't smell comes from the emperor, because the emperor was making so much money with the urine that his son said, but it smells. And the emperor put a bag of money in front of his son and said, does it smell? The urine may smell, but the money doesn't smell. I make with the urine. And therefore comes the proverb, money doesn't smell. I'm going to, I see it's already 8:50, but you see a little bit the thinking, how we create a different framework of there's not the typical market for the basic needs, and I insist on the basic needs. We don't tolerate the unemployment, we don't tolerate the waste, we're focusing on value generation. And let's now look at some of the examples, right? So Las Gaviotas is the one I've been involved in longest, 36 years. And it's been very satisfying because we started with a savanna where there was no land, no trees. We regenerated the trees, and if you want to know how we did it, we can talk about it, but that may be too many details. We regenerated the trees, but we regenerated biodiversity. We went from 17 plant species to 256 in 2 decades. How do you feel about putting nature back on its evolutionary path? I mean, do you think this may be a condition that is conducive to happiness? Is there not arrogance, but now pride, that you know how to work with nature? Isn't this something where you say, wow, let me do this again? And I think this is very important. It takes time. You have a certain impatience to get started, but you have a great patience to get your results. You can't regenerate biodiversity in a flip. But we can regenerate biodiversity by securing that you have an environment that is conducive, so everyone comes back. So, to me, the power has been that we regenerated biodiversity. We never woke up in the morning and said, we're going to regenerate biodiversity. No. We realized that the framework was such, and the forest was so important because it was bringing the water, and the water was bringing the health, and because the water and the health, and of course the forest is also healthy, so we see the biodiversity coming. Who wants to destroy that? Who is going to cut down the trees now? There's no one who wants to cut down the trees. And there is no discussion about the values that are generated. And now we're tapping the trees, and the trees gives you resin. And from the resin, we have the local factory, and we extract the turpentine. You know turpentine? And the turpentine has become our fuel. All our engines run on turpentine. Have you heard of a car that runs on turpentine? Well, Honda started his business there. You know Honda? Mr. Honda started by selling motor bicycles and turpentine. And he tapped it from the pine trees. You have a few pine trees? Are you doing turpentine business? You probably think it's not competitive. You probably think the price is not low enough, competing with others. Well, we are making turpentine, and all our engines run on turpentine. What does it mean? We are zero emissions. Because all what we burn in our engines is fixed in the trees. We take 1% of the tree and 99% stays there. Of course, you need a few trees. You need hundreds of millions of trees. But don't you have hundreds of millions of trees in, this is not part of the characteristic of Estonia? So why do you keep on buying gas from the Russians? May I just ask a question? How happy would you be if you don't have to buy gas from someone else? And I'm just asking, this is how you start by framing that future, by saying, well, why not? And of course, since I have the pleasure of having done something like that in Colombia, I think Estonia is easier than Colombia. Maybe you would agree. Would you like to try it in Colombia, or would you like to try it here? I think here is a bit easier. And so I'm trying to frame this and saying, that is an environment where not only we are happy because we have dreams and we go beyond the dreams. This is very special in life, no? You have a dream, you work all your life for that dream, and you're even doing better than you were dreaming. Then society gets excited. People may get a bit overconfident now. Isn't it nice that the kids get overconfident and think they can do better? I mean, isn't this the environment that gives us this, what I would say, conduciveness to health and happiness? Let me take the second case. And even my friend Ville, who's heard me a few times, never heard this case before. It's called Songhai. Who has been to Songhai? Who has heard about Songhai?
Not Shanghai, but Songhai.
Songhai. We are in Benin. Has anyone of you been to Benin? You didn't go there, Ville?
No.
Songhai is in Porto Novo, the capital city. It was started in 1986, 2 years after Las Gaviotas. And it's a peri-urban farm, and today, so Gaviotas is 10,000 people. Here we have 450 families, peri-urban. So very different. In Colombia, it's a lot of space. You know, it's a different approach when you have a lot of space than when you're confined to a city with a peri-urban area. And in Songhai, it was decided, you must have been, I mean, we were all very romantic, of course, because we thought that we were going to have the first African biofarm. We're going to be the first certified organic farm. You know, you have to be extremely romantic to think that you can do that. But ladies and gentlemen, today we're the largest training center in Africa for agriculture that is not linked to a university, because the only thing we do is farm organic in the peri-urban area. And we produce everything on the farm. But of course, this is not about forests, because we don't have the space for the forest. So we started with what everyone, when you were to start a farm, what's the first animal you think of? What would you have? Animal.
Sheep.
Sheep? If you have even not enough space for sheep.
Chicken.
Chicken. Start with chicken. So we start with chickens. Actually, we start with a very small chicken. It's a very small one, which is called a quail. You know the quails? So we started with quails. And then we ask ourselves, what do the quails eat? Of course, everyone says they eat grains. No. Go back to the real story of the quails. And we found out that quails actually love to eat one thing a lot. It's called the larvae of a fly. Now, any of you who's been to Africa, difficult to find flies? I mean, they're everywhere. So now we had to figure out how to farm the flies, because they like to eat it. So in 1986, we started with the first fly farm. And the fly farm, of course, the flies, they give larvae. And the larvae, you know, it's great protein, and the quails like it. But the quails like the larvae because the quails come from a very dry environment. And one of the things the larvae do is suck the moisture out of the air into their bodies. I mean, this is a fantastic machine. I mean, how good are you in taking air out of the water out of the air? And so what we realized is that if we wanted to have the quail farm, we needed to have the feed for the quails, because otherwise in Africa, if you don't have it yourself, you're not getting it. You need to take care of it yourself. So from the very simple beginning of a quail and the feed, actually we started the fly larvae business. On the spot. But we didn't know these flies were going to be so productive. I mean, again, nature is so overly generous that sometimes you're so surprised with what nature is doing for you. So, you know, 1 kilogram of fly eggs gives you in 5 days 375 kilograms of protein. Now, we didn't have enough quails. So we were quickly digging some ponds to put in some fish and feed them to the fish. So we had a fish farm we didn't plan for. You know, you see how you go? Abundance. And once you have abundance, what do you do with abundance? Well, create something new. Don't say, oh, I have abundance, I have to stop doing this. I mean, what a strange attitude we would have. But this is what we very often do. We think we have too much of something and therefore we want to reduce that. So we started with the quails, we had the flies, then we had the fish, and of course the fish, you have to harvest the fish, you fillet them, and then you could feed it back to the quails. And then the quails, of course, they have the little eggs. We were shipping the eggs because, you know, in Africa, people didn't think those quail eggs were any worth. But the French like it. The French love quail eggs. So we were shipping the quail eggs to France, and by only shipping, you know, a couple cases of these eggs, we were making so much money. We couldn't believe it. We couldn't believe the French liked this so much. And of course, this was natural fat, this nature feed. You don't have to say it's a larvae, because then people don't get so excited anymore. I mean, there's a little touch of marketing in there. So then we had this massive amount of fertilizer, and then we realized that when you have this fertilizer, you can very quickly start farming in a land that wasn't good for farming. But the quail eggs, you know, they're producing very good excrements. And so we were into the farming, and the farming gave us the fruits, and the fruits gave us the vegetables, and the fruits and the vegetables, we started making juices, because no one was buying our vegetables. No one in Africa was really interested in buying vegetables from a bio-farmer. But the fresh juices, we marketed them to all the embassies. And all the embassies, they were so happy they had organic juice. And so we were making good money on the embassies. And the result is that we started with 3 people, and we're now with 450. We have a school where 200 people work full-time to train how to farm flies. Have you ever thought about farming flies in your life? You know, it's funny. Part of the things in the framework of the economy of happiness is that you like surprises. I mean, we like to be surprised and learning about things we had no clue that was possible. But when you listen to it, you say, why not? Makes sense. I'm very happy to tell you, and then I'll tell you why I'm perhaps not so happy, but I'm very happy to tell you, you know what a unicorn is? A company that makes $1 billion. The first unicorn from Africa in agriculture is the largest fly farming company in Africa today. The bad news is I didn't take a share. You know, that's my little sad story related to it. And I'm very proud that when that company started in 2010, I was there and we trained them how to do it. And they've taken it global. Fly farming has become a new way of farming because we need protein to feed our chickens and our quails and our fish, and we can't keep on emptying the Peruvian seas of their herrings to be able to say that the Norwegian salmon is rich in omega-3. Didn't come from the salmon, came from the herrings they were over-harvesting and are over-harvesting. But you can do that as well with fly larvae. Did you ever imagine that a fly could make you happy? She makes me happy because the impact that we have, and now I'm again going beyond the dreams. I could never imagine there would be $1 billion valuation on a company doing flies and larvae. Using what as a feedstock? Slaughterhouse waste. Has slaughterhouse waste ever made you happy? But it doesn't make you happy because you think it is smelly, it's meat, you're vegetarian, you don't want it, and all of that. But then you realize there's a complete shift possible. And today, we are actively training every year hundreds of farmers who are going to take waste, which is actually a health hazard. If you don't take good care of offal, of the waste of the animals from slaughtering, then it is a health hazard. It's much better to create the food. We are, thanks to the experience of the companies called Agri-Protein, that's the largest fly farmer in the world now, it's based in South Africa. But thanks to their experience, we know that it's a very valuable proposition. But why is it so valuable? Well, what do they start with? Something no one wants. I mean, the basis is something no one wants. Second, the way they process it is something no one wants to do. And why don't we want to do it? Because we do not know how much it can do good. And it's our ignorance that guides us to having this, oh no, not for me. Oh, this is a great project, but that's for you. No. In the context that we're working, it is an extraordinary opportunity. And that opportunity we need to grasp. How many of you have lived in Africa? Not visited, lived. I lived 8 years in Africa. I don't have malaria. But when you have lived in Africa, you know there are many limitations. But when you have many limitations, you have a much greater ease to get going as well. And one of the pleasures is that what we were able to start in Songhai is something that you could never start anywhere else. Now, for all of these projects, let me just remind you, Las Gaviotas in Songhai, there is a local leader who is really an inspiration. And I just wanted to be very clear on record, don't think that's me. I've been able to participate, to follow, to be the fly on the wall, to listen, to see, to contribute. But each of these projects, Las Gaviotas, is Paulo Lugari, an amazing man, and he's still leading it. And in Songhai, it's Father Nzamujo, who is originally a Nigerian. You know, when you have people who have this kind of grand vision, if that grand vision doesn't sound like crazy the first time you hear it, it's no vision. If it sounds reasonable when you listen to it, it's not going to be a happy one. You have to be unreasonable. So framework condition is, well, be unreasonable. When people tell you you're crazy, consider it a compliment. Be happy to be considered crazy. But the difference between being crazy and being a visionary is your capacity to implement it. And implementing can never be done alone. And the team you need to implement just on the 2 projects that I've mentioned cannot be all the same profession. Diversity is the key. You need to have a very diverse group of people to be able to do this. And the capacity to manage a very diverse group of people is a challenge for anyone in human resources. So your leadership is not leading. Your leadership is securing that this diverse group can work together in a way that we have not imagined. Particularly when you have professions like quail farming, fish farming, and fly farming. How do you make it work together? Well, I tell you, there is a great intelligence in timing it together, because between a larvae and a fly is 3 hours. If you miss the 3 hours, you are covered by flies. And you have to extract yourself from the logic of the economy, because economy will tell you economy of scale. We know that if you are going for 100 tons of larvae per day, that means a huge challenge. But if you have small farms like we have in Songhai, these small farms will provide you the direct feed to your chickens and your quails and your fish, and all in the perfect hygiene. Songhai has been, a part of my happiness experience. Because when you reach the level that it's going so well that you can say, oh, we can share now with everyone else. We have, in Songhai, we've had thousands of farmers from South Africa come to learn how to manage a farm. Peri-urban, where poverty is the worst, where people who've left the farms come to the peri-urban area, and usually it's a shanty town. It's a town infested with poverty. Can't have happiness there. If you go to Porto Novo in Benin, you find a place where you say, what happened here? This is not the Africa that I know. No, but it's the Africa that can be. And since we've done it, don't tell me it's difficult. Of course it's difficult, but don't tell me it can't be done, because it has been done. And there are great leaders who have repeated it. And I think this is also very important. The economy the framework of the economy of happiness is a framework where people have a chance to share what worked without franchising. I mean, once you start franchising, you start putting everything in a box. And then you want everyone to repeat exactly as you've done. Third example. May I remain tropical in my examples? We'll go to Fiji. Who's been to Fiji? You don't travel, huh? Or am I choosing strange places? So in Fiji, there is a project that we have been in, Montfort. Montfort Boys Town. Fiji is a wonderful resort area, but Montfort Boys Town is a vocational training school. And we had a vision. Vocational training usually means you learn how to repair a car. Vocational training means you know how to make furniture. Vocational training means you learn how to program software. That's vocational schools in general. We said, what if we would have a vocational school where the kids learn how to take care of their food for the rest of their life? By working half a day a week. Sounds more interesting, right, than becoming your own farmer. And so we had this knowledge from these wonderful Chinese farmers, and we said, let's do that in a school with 220 boys. It's a boys' school. Boys between 14 and 18. And what do you think is the greatest profession a young boy imagines in Fiji? Professional rugby. They want to be rugby players. Now, how do you entice those who dream of being professional rugby players to be farmers? The only way you can entice them is that it becomes easy. And so what we did is we started integrating what we had learned from different of our schools. No fly farming. We didn't do the fly farming there. So we've learned that, one of the things is that when you want people to be happy is also they have to discover what they can do, which is so different from what their dream was telling them. I mean, I could never pass as a pseudo rugby trainer. They would realize after 1 minute that I have no idea about rugby. So how could I be interesting for them? It's interesting because there are things that you surprise. One of the characteristics of a happy society is there are many surprises. Intellectual surprises, pleasant surprises. Some unpleasant surprises will come without planning. But we can plan the pleasant surprises. And surprise is very important in a society, so you have the surprises. Again, I have to ask, Ave, when do you want me to finish?
9 o'clock.
Oh, 9 o'clock, we have 45 minutes. But you should have time for questions as well. I mean, it's not fair to only have to listen to me.
Maybe 10 o'clock. It's okay.
10 o'clock. In in Montfort, we started with what some of you may know is my favorite one, mushroom farming. I love mushroom farming. I think mushroom farming, you know, why do I like mushroom farming so much? Is because you take a fibrous waste, you put in the mushroom, and 2 weeks later, harvest. I mean, this is fantastic. I don't know about you, but I get excited when after 2 weeks, pop, pop, all these mushrooms pop out. And they're even tasty. You can cook them yourself. You can eat them raw if you want to. You can make them with butter if you like to. You can make a broth with it. So I thought that these guys, they would be kind of surprised to see that. But I have to have a hook. You know, I'm very keen on motivating young men to have a vision for their life beyond rugby or beyond any sport. They all want to be messy, but it's not going to be messy so easily. So I needed to have a raw material which was a bit interesting. What do these boys who think rugby like to drink? Beer, obviously. So I started with the raw material, the waste of the beer. And the brewery was only 8 kilometers away. So for these 16-year-olds to go to the brewery is already quite an experience, because most of the time the head of the school doesn't want to go to the brewery at all. And they're picking up the solid biomass after the extraction of the starch. That's full of fiber, it's nice and wet, it's been fermented. Fermented means very hygienic. Don't forget, I'm a Belgian. We're beer brewers for more than 800 years. We know that beer was not brewed to get drunk. Beer was brewed to have a healthy drink. That's what beer is all about. What they made out of it afterwards, that's marketing. But originally, beer was brewed by the monks. And the monks in the monasteries, they drank the beer every day for good health in their digestion. Of course, that meant they had a very wild yeast, and they had very good starch. Anyway, that's another story. So we get them to bring from the brewery the biomass, we press it together, we put it in the bag, we add the mushrooms, we build a mushroom house, which basically means bamboo with some palm leaves on top of it, and 2 weeks later we have mushrooms. Wow, mushrooms. They learn how to cook the mushrooms. Then we have too much of this waste after the mushrooms have grown, and so we said we'll give them to the pigs. We said, pigs don't eat this. Well, if you take a little pig of 1 month old, then she will eat this because she knows nothing else but mother's milk. And that's just been taken away. But the pig at that age is smart, and he or she knows that there's a lot of protein in this waste. But what don't rugby players, what don't they like about pigs? They don't want to clean the pigs. You know, cleaning the pig farm is something that young boys don't want to do. So the reaction is that I'm not doing pigs. No, that's for you. You do the pig farm. I'm busy with the mushrooms. So we had everyone focusing on the mushrooms, no one wanted to do the pigs. But then you have to come up with a surprise. And then you say, we can teach the pigs to do the pee-pee in the corner. You say, oh, no. That's surprise. I told you. Very important. In a framework where people get engaged is because you got many surprises. And one of those surprises is, let's teach the pigs to go to the toilet. It takes 3 days. It's done. So these boys, they think this is fantastic. I mean, if you play rugby, you know how to run after, right? And so they know how to get the little pigs, and we teach the pigs. I'm not going to tell you how it works. We can do that sometime later. But we teach all the 60 weaners, the little pigs of 1 month old, in 3 days, all of them going to the toilet. Oh, pigs are great now. And pigs became their big discussion, of course, because they had never thought about the pig being smarter than the dog. Because who trains the dog in 3 days? Usually a little bit longer. I was trained probably in 9 months. I don't know how long it took. My mother told me it took a long time. You know, the youngest in the family always takes a little bit longer being clean at night. So we had these fantastic discussions about, you know, how fast did you learn to go to the toilet instead of doing it in your bed? And, you know, this is a discussion where boys get all, I mean, of course, they start picking on each other and, you know, So we had now the pigs. The pigs, of course, they went to the toilet. What do you do with all the waste from the toilet? You do biogas. We started producing biogas. And now they had fire. Oh, boys and fire, I tell you, this is fun. You know, they learn how to make the fire. They realize that there is fire coming out, there is gas. And then when you have a lot of gas, there is this slurry, this meshy stuff coming out of the digester. And in that we started farming spirulina. You know spirulina? So all at once we had a spirulina farm, and when they learned about spirulina, they were looking themselves like this. I mean, we're going to be the healthy ones. Our muscles will be very clean muscles. And so we're getting the spirulina farm going, and of course the spirulina farm is done in different levels. And then when you have a lot of spirulina, who knows spirulina well here? When you have spirulina, what's the pH of the water? It's very alkaline. You have high alkaline water, and in high alkaline water, you have a lot of zooplankton, phytoplankton, benthos, and then we had all the feed for our fish, no larvae. So we created the feed for the feed of the fish. We were not feeding the fish. They thought this was fantastic. This was magic. They had to tell that to their mom and dad. We're farming fish and we don't feed the fish. And basically what is happening that in no river in the world, in no lake in the world, someone is feeding the fish. We are the only ones who feed fish. So not very economical. So they started to farm the fish. And now we had this system where that we had too much, you know what BOD is? Biological oxygen demand. We had too much biomass in the water. So the water needs to be cleansed in the old system. No. We could take 1/3 of the water surface and we would plant rice on it, floating rice, so that the rice could absorb more of the nutrients from the water. And then you have such rich water that the dikes around are all going to be veggie farms. And you take the water and you put the water on the veggie farms. And what do you need to do? Well, the 220 boys, they had to work half a day to make it operate. Half a day. And you have all the mushroom, the pork, the fish, the spirulina, the rice, and the vegetables. Do you think this is conducive to happiness? Do you think there is pride? What do you think happens when the mothers and the fathers come to the graduation? What do you think happens? Wow, my son. Yeah, he may still be a rugby player someday, but he comes home on these islands and he knows how to take care of the food. And when there's no beer around, there will at least be lots of plants around, and plants who can do the same as you did with the beer. But I needed beer to get started. If I didn't have the beer, I didn't have the interest to say, let's do this with the palm tree. They would not have been there. Let's go to the brewery. All were ready to go. And maybe I served the beer here and there as well, of course. But, you know, what I think is very important with the Montfort Boys' Town, we learned really that the vision of this young man was, of course, the rugby. And a rugby world is a world. And that's a real world, but how many of them of the vocational school would ever realize their dream? And now they go back home and they're realizing much more than their parents could dream. What happens when the parents have this pride of that son who can do all of that? And of course, when the parents are proud of their children, what is happening to the children? They're proud of themselves. You know, this is perhaps one of my very, very happy experiences. It's very fulfilling to see that. But I have to tell you the whole story. In 2008, there was a coup d'etat in Fiji, and the school was closed by the army. I didn't train the army. That means the whole system collapsed. After 2 years, it kept on working for 2 years by a few of the kids who were able to get into the school, but the school was closed. So this is the project that is not ongoing. Very sad. I was very happy for a while, and very sad, of course, still today, that it's not around anymore. But you know, we have to realize that there is a reality that we can't always control. And so it was very sad, but on the other hand, it was an extraordinary experience. And particularly in this context of young, you know, I don't know if you're aware that in most of the countries where the virus has hit badly, there are more young men between 16 and 26 who died from suicide than from the virus. Young men are a very vulnerable age group, because what society is making out of them is something that many of them can't live up to. So I just want you to be aware, it's a very, very special framework to be able to create a dream that is actually feasible. And therefore, this experience has been a very special one for me. You want to have another one? So let's talk about rumpan. I don't have to teach anyone anything about eco-villages. This is an eco-village. This is a wonderful place to be. But here you have something that I have learned in an amazing way. It's not just about the piece of land, the ecological buildings, the fact that the community has really been thriving with their own energy for a long time. I mean, there are hundreds of communities engaging in this. But what Rumpan really taught me is the logic of the person behind it, who is Anders Nyquist, who is the son of a captain of the Baltic Sea, who very seldom saw his dad, living on an island in front of Sundsvall in Sweden. This is Sundsvall, Sweden. It's 20 kilometers outside of Sundsvall. And he bought the land in 1964. You can imagine his age now. I was still wearing short pants when he was starting with his eco-village. He started his eco-village, bought the land, and developed what we all do, built the houses and all the infrastructure and the roads and the energy and so on. But he brought forward an extraordinary economic model of how to engage people to be happier. And that was that he designed a way of living in the village that he could work half of the time, and that he could have, with half of the salary, he could actually dedicate his time that he has available to reduce by another half the amount of purchasing power he needed to be living in an eco-village. Meaning, working half and only having a quarter of the original purchasing power to live happy. And of course, you can't do that on your own. You need to have a community to do that. And so the whole thinking behind Design of the Village was that we will reduce energy consumption to the point. We will reduce use of cars to the point. We will have less need for energy in heating. We will produce more of our own food, protein and non-protein based. We will be generating more of our own that we're able to actually work half and earn half. Meaning with a quarter of my purchasing power, I can make it work. And he's been practicing that now for 40 years with his whole community. It's quite an amazing decision to be able to say, I will only have a quarter of my purchasing power, and he can still travel, he can still when he wants to. And the economics behind it, and I put it in the book, the economics behind it is actually rather simple. You just need to have a very energy efficient house. You just need to use, just like you have a limited farming period because of the winter, you just need to use exactly what you have, and you secure that you let nature produce more for you in an easy way. I think the case of Anders Nyquist is one of the very few cases. We've just got his book out. We just got his book of his 50 years of building an eco-village, where with a quarter of your money you thought you needed, you can have a very happy life. And health, because of course if you spend so much time out and work and let your hands work, you can go very far. So there I'm saying there is a book out, it's now in Swedish, we'll have it in English, I speak Swedish. So we'll have it out in Swedish, we have it out in Swedish already, but we were able to show how actually the hook we have on earning money to be able to do what we want to do, they have actually created what I would call the antithesis. Yes, you need to earn money, but you don't need to earn so much money. And the same logic that I've learned from Rumpan, we have applied in one of our other big projects, which is called El Hierro. You know El Hierro? The island not in the Caribbean, the island in Spain. Okay, that logic of the earnings we need, the purchasing power you need, is something that is so critical because we think we need to earn so much in order to be able to be happy with our minimum needs. But what has demonstrated, Anders, is that you can do a quarter and you can do much more and be happier and healthier. 1, 2, 3, 4. I would like to just share where I live, because I'm very happy where I live, although I can't go there now. I'm a nomad for the moment. After 3 months in Colombia, I thought I was able to travel back to Japan, where is my residency since 26 years. And Japan doesn't let Europeans in yet. So I can't travel to Japan, can't travel back to my home. And when I'm able to force perhaps the situation and go there anyway, I'm not allowed to use public transportation. Now, I don't know if you've been to Japan, but in Japan without public transportation, it's a nightmare. Japan is the country of public transportation. So I'm at least till the 1st of August in Europe, because I've left Colombia and they don't let me in anymore. I've just got to come from Europe. And I can't go to Japan because if I go there, first I can't get in. If I can get in, I can't use public transport. And then I'm saying, so I'm going to be in Europe till for a little while. Yeah, as a nomad, going from place to place perhaps. But I live in Japan in a place called Kamakura. Have you heard of it? Who has been to Japan? 1, 2. Have you seen the big Buddha in Japan? I live close to the big Buddha. Oh, yes, Avi. Yes. I live close to the big Buddha. Actually, Kamakura is the home of Zen Buddhism in the world. And it's one of those places where I live in a wooden house from 1937. 2 stories, no furniture. It makes me happy. Because the happiness is not in the house. The happiness is out of the house, in the garden. Because I have a garden without grass. I have a garden with moss. The greatness of a garden in Japan is that you have different mosses. And I tell you, if you want to walk on moss, I don't know if you've walked on moss lately with your bare feet, but walking on moss is like, it's very pleasant. And of course, the excitement in Japan, and there's no way of escaping it, the excitement of Japan is the cherry blossoms. You need to have the blossoms, and if you don't have the blossoms, there's no excitement, there's no happiness. Just to measure the degree of how far the cherry blossom is already open is a very intense experience. I had no clue this was so intense until I got into Japan. In my own garden, I have these extraordinary, and I live in the little valley where I live. There are 6 temples. So, like some countries, you have the cathedral, giving you the clock. I have, when they go for their chants in the morning, and if the wind is in the right direction, I can hear the chants. Wow, what a pleasure! What a luxury. So I've been enjoying this environment where what very few people know. Already in the 11th century, women had the right to divorce their husbands. Men could not divorce their wives. The wives could divorce the husbands. Did you know that? 11th century, Japan, by imperial decree, women who were badly treated, who considered themselves badly treated by men in the 11th century, could get a divorce. They had to go and explain to one of the temples, which only much later became Zen temples. Zen is rather a new thing. But in the 11th century, when they were able to explain that they were badly treated, then they would be received in the temple for 3 years, and then the abbot would give them a new name, and they could start life again. Isn't that amazing? Japan, that's the country where we think the women walk 3 steps behind the men. No. And so you're in this environment where you see what the pattern that's coming back. Surprise. Surprise. And every morning at 7 o'clock when I'm there, I can go to the fish market and get my fresh herrings. What about having fresh herrings in the morning? And you fillet them and you make your little aji, sashimi from aji. Isn't this happiness? Isn't happiness finding extreme pleasures in the extreme simple, like a flower just opening up, or a little fish that has just been, harvested? And I think that I closed my book on the economy of happiness with how I am experiencing my own simple happiness when I can write fables for children and have lots of children reading this. Is this not happiness? Doesn't it give you gratitude in life when you know that there are so many children reading and you didn't even make a proposal to anyone to please read my book? Because there is a kind of a gravitation around us that brings things together. And so I want to conclude my not so small presentation, but my first presentation on my book, The Economy of Happiness, with the wisdom that I learned from so many things that I have done wrong and right, and how I got into the wrong space and how to correct it, is that I learned that happiness perhaps depends very much on the fact that you are clear in your mind that you are not the wave. you're the surfer. And happiness depends on finding the waves around you and surfing the ones that make you be happy and healthy. So, in conclusion, be a surfer, don't try to be the wave. Thank you. How many of you feel surfer? How many of you have tried to be the wave? And if you try to be the wave, you know, you may get some trouble with your heart, and you may have some trouble with a lot of other things. So, you know, over to you.
Yeah, thank you for your speech, Mr. Pauli. And I have several questions actually. First would be, how did you actually ensure the full employment with such a radical innovation in primary and secondary and third sector in all your projects over there? What happened to all these people employed by the arrogance, so as you said?
You know, when you want to do something radically new and different, you have to be in the periphery of life, in the periphery. That means you can't do it in Paris, and you probably can't do it in Tallinn. You have to be in a place where, well, I would call it periphery, where there is a high degree of freedom to go outside the norm, and where there's a high degree of freedom to be unconventional, to do things that people think are crazy. And so I think change can only happen in the periphery of this kind. And you can only imagine and implement several of these initiatives when you're in a place where they let you do it. And that's not in the center of power. That means you have to leave the centers of power and you have to go where there is more freedom to act and be. So that's my very general suggestion, is, you know, what I've talked about, none of these initiatives are in the center of power. None of these are in the center of great cities with, you know, wealth. They're all in places where people aspire to the basics in life.
How did you manage to have the full employment there?
Oh, by having many activities. You know, the employment is not difficult. Finding things to do is not difficult. The difficulty is earning the money to pay people. You know, and that means you have to, I didn't go into those details, it means you have to learn how to calculate where do the values come from and how do I redistribute those values. And this is, I only touched upon it, it's like what I said, the multiple values is also, I could translate into multiple cash flows. So if I have a forest, and the forest generates me the water doesn't really give me an income, because I want to give the water for free. I mean, I don't want to be Nestle, pumping water out of the soil and selling it to people at a high price with a beautiful brand like it came from Toscana, you know. So I don't want to be there, I want to be, but in order to give the water for free, who pays the bills? Forever. And that means that I have to have a logic whereby 10% of the water is actually bottled and sold to 2 restaurants in Bogota, Colombia, and they pay me, and they do something else apart from paying the water which they sell to the people, telling this is the water from the regenerated forest. On top of that, when the trucks go to Bogota, which may take 3 days of travel to deliver the water, they come back with the used frying oil from the restaurant so that I can do my biodiesel. You know, I need to design this kind of business deals because otherwise I don't have the cash. I need to have the cash to pay. So the cash compromise in the whole overall framework was that everyone has water for free, but 10% is sold at the same price as Evian, Pellegrino. And I think we're worth it. Of course, you need someone who believes you're worth it, and that means there's a restaurant owner who says, I will put it on the dish, and that's the only water we serve. So we need to find where is the value. I have an ethical value, meaning that I'm committed to having drinking water for free because it's part of this tummy health. But at the same time, I need the bill to be paid, so where am I finding it? And that's the continuous search. But second, once we realized that we could tap enough turpentine from the trees to eliminate all the purchase of petroleum for the gasoline engines, we made a calculation how much petroleum is being purchased here. That means that there was $1.6 million was leaving the community in cash to bring in petroleum, and that money now stayed in the local economy. Well, that's what I call purchasing power that is not going out but staying in. And if I have 1.6 million, I mean, it is a population of 10,000. 1.6 million, you know, that's 1,600 per person. I mean, that means there's a lot of money all at once available, and where does it go? Well, we're not going to take it and now have a beer. We're going to take it and we're going to start planting more trees, and now we may have some palm trees and we get some palm oil from those native trees, and now we have a cooking oil which was also imported before from outside. And it's not because I'm against import, but I'm in favor of keeping the money circulating locally. And that's where I get my mathematical models going, because I need to calculate all of that. And once I know that I have a budget for a hospital, I think you all know a budget for a hospital is a couple $1 million a year. So when I don't have to spend the budget on the $1 million that comes from the pockets of the community, goes into health, I have healthy people, I don't need to spend that money. That money, again, I can use to make productive investments. Now, instead of just taking the cooking oil and have it raw, I can have a little factory and make my own soap. And, you know, this is the way we keep on going all the time. And it's the creativity of the local people to figure out, what else can we do?
And are they figuring this out? What would be the doctor doing, for example, who has no job right now?
Oh, the doctor, I can guarantee there are many other communities close by where he can do a lot of great work.
Okay.
So, but you know, there is a natural gravitation to doing more good, instead of having a community where more and more people are undoing the bad. See the difference in an economy? If you have an economy where a lot of money is being spent to take care of the waste, how good are you doing to your community? Is that resilience? Is that building resilience in the community? Is that building happiness in the community? No. So we have too much activity in our economy dedicated to undoing the bad, reducing the negative impact. What I'm looking at is how can we do much more in the economy? And of course, this is a not productive investment. This is a highly productive investment. And that's how we can keep on going on this full employment. In the case of Songhai, there was a very unique factor, is the training. So many people wanted to learn that actually we needed to nearly double the employment to train people who wanted to learn how to do it. And you know, one of the most gratifying tasks in life is to teach what you know, share what you know. I mean, this is a very happy, you know, a very happy thing to do. At least if you're teaching something that you're very proud of. Okay?
Thank you for your amazing speech. And about this Montfort model, is it the model itself easy to copy and implement into different areas, and how easy to scale it?
Thank you. Scaling is not what we believe is the best, but what is the right size depends on what you have available. In the case of Montfort, we had way too much water because it's the rainy side of the Fiji Islands, and it means it's 9 months rain. So we had to make use of the water. That was the main thing we had to do. But if you have a lot of rain all the time, that means all the minerals go out of your soil all the time. That means we have to invent something else. So scale is very much limited to what you can manage with the people you have. So, for example, the fish ponds were 1/3 of a hectare, 3 meter deep. Very simple. Why? Because if you want to use the nets to take out the fish, if you're more than 300 meters, I wish you good luck to take out the fish. You know, so there's some very pragmatic limitations to what you do. How many pigs can you handle? I think, and I don't know, anyone here has worked with pigs? But the maximum that I can see people can work in a happy environment is 60 pigs. You go beyond 60 pigs, you're going to be nasty with the pigs, because they're not all behaving in the same way. And the pigs may be a little bit nasty to you. They bite, you know, and they can bump you. And so what is important is how much can you deal with. We know, for example, from our experience in El Hierro in Spain, that if you have more than 50 goats, the goats are not happy anymore, because you don't know the name of every goat anymore. And if you don't know the name of every goat, and you say the wrong name to the wrong goat, I guarantee you, next day you have 10% less milk. I mean, she doesn't like that, to be called Mary when she's Josephine. And I think it's, you know, this is real. We've lived it. And so what is the maximum? Well, we have said 50 goats in a farm, that's it, no more. And there is something there that we can't say that is it. If you're very smart and you could remember 70 names, do the 70 goats. But, you know, don't mess the goats with name. So there are some things that are limited. My friends at AgriProtein, they've been growing bigger and bigger and bigger, and they tested to 50 tons a day, and 100 tons was on their minds. I mean, they've come back from it. I mean, it's difficult. And I think this is where we need to look at how the community, our community of the forest here, is 8,000 hectares. 8,000 hectares is what can be managed. Because what is the greatest danger for a forest? Fire. So how secure can you be when you have a much greater forest? How can you manage fire? When fire happens, how soon can you intervene? And so there are certain considerations that always come to the same. Keep it at a human scale. Keep it at an ecosystem scale. And then you can manage. Yes?
First question was really good about how can you ensure a job for everybody. But I believe now that everybody has stuff to do enough. But how can you motivate people to take, especially the not so pleasant considered jobs that we usually have people immigrating to take those jobs here in the Western countries? So how do you deal with people's motivation there?
You know, as you have heard throughout, I'm not doing as much in Europe as I'm doing elsewhere in the world. And maybe because I think the Europeans are a bit difficult. You know, they think they're the center of the world. So, honestly speaking, that's, I think, one of the limitations. But second, I can share with you my experience or my preparations. We've done just one experience, but I will be visiting 20 cities in France. And in every city in France, we're going to take one day with a team of ours to imagine all the jobs that need to be done, you know. But of course, very much depends on our language. If I say jobs to be done and not pleasant jobs, it already creates a barrier. I think one of the first things we need to learn to do is change the language. I mean, if we stop talking about waste And let me be very blunt. If we stop talking about shit, of course, and we take it another word, I mean, because in the end of the day, what is it? And what is in a name? Very often we have already a value judgment by doing the description of the job. You know, so we need to be very conscious of how we have conditioned a lot of what we don't like because the words we have chosen to describe it. So it's not so easy to go around it. But I think there are a lot of jobs that just need to be taken out of the job description. If we keep on dividing jobs as very narrowly defined activities, you're most likely going to find a lot of them boring and not fulfilling at all. But if you would take them in a more holistic context, and it is part of a job, then you will be in better balance. And I think one of the conditions that we think is a real challenge in society is that we have compartmentalized. We have created pillars that are very clearly defined, and nothing goes beyond that pillar. And of course, if you don't fit in that pillar, it's not yours. I think we need much more transversal activities where we have different things to do. And mind you, in Rumpan, one of the activities they eliminated is wastewater treatment. And how do you eliminate wastewater treatment? By having dry toilets. This is a village with only dry toilets. No water toilets, no flushing toilets. Now, if you design a village where everyone is using dry toilets, you have eliminated something which no one likes to do. Take care of the shit that flows. And how did you do it? Well, because there is a different look that has come. And of course, what does it mean? And I'm going now into the technical details because this has been so beautiful with all of these experiences. There's a lot of technical detail. How do you create a dry toilet that doesn't smell? Because I tell you, most people don't want it because they think it'll smell. And so they have become producers of dry toilets. They have become the designers of dry toilets. And as a result, there is no wastewater treatment. Now, what happens to your budget in a community when you have no wastewater treatment anymore? Wow, it's a lot of money that turns free. That's a lot of taxes you don't have to pay anymore. And so what you see is a whole chain reaction. Of course, what is the result? The government says you must flush. Yeah, because they think that this is hygiene. Hygiene means flushing. Using drinking water to flush. And so it took them 20 years to get the permit to use what they already have. And so this is part of the challenge as well. How do we succeed in getting, first of all, out of the silos, transversal? Second, how do we change the language so it doesn't sound like so bad? But third, are we prepared to design things in a different way so a lot of the obvious obstacles are not there anymore? And let me tell you, I brought the Queen of Bhutan, the preferred queen of the king. I brought the Queen of Bhutan to Rumpan, and she used the toilet. And she didn't complain. Because we explained why and how, and she thought it was the way that she has been doing it all her youth. She thought that, you know, these flushing toilets that were installed in the palace were a disgrace. But she had never ever been able to tell anyone that she thinks this is a disgrace. You know, and I think this is very important. There's so much that we are conditioned as good and bad, and I like and I don't like, but who decided it? Who really put it in our brain that we don't like this? Well, I think there's a French author who is part of my team doing the tour of France, not on a bicycle, but we're doing the tour of France, and his name is Idriss Aberkan. He's an Algerian immigrant. And Idriss, he wrote a book in French called Libérez votre cerveau. Turn free your brain. I mean, you have to free up your brain. You have to let your brain go where so many of the boxes said, don't go there. And so I think This is one of the greatest challenges in Europe, is we're too stuck in that little box and we stick to it because we've been told that's what it is. Okay.
How big is your management team? So-called management team, how big?
My management team, 0. We are a non-existent organization. Wherever I sleep is my headquarters. Unfortunately, though, I have 34 project teams around the world today, 34. And today there are about 800 people involved in those projects. So that's why people complain to me and say, your website is out of date. Yes, because I have no one in the website, because when I'm sleeping I can't do that. So we have no people taking care of websites. If it's someone is doing it, because we had a volunteer who said, I will update. No headquarters, no central team. Because I believe that happiness means that you're not needed. If you're needed, you create dependency. It's again an economic principle, one of those that I haven't talked about. If you create dependency, then you can't be happy. You can only be happy when you know what you've done has been taken over by someone else who does it better than you. Then you've done a good job. Then you can move on to something else, you know? Sorry, you...
To continue what you just said, comment on profit.
Mohammed the Prophet or Prophet the money?
A profit paying out dividends to shareholders.
Okay, sorry. I just want to make certain.
Main principle of a...
When you do good, and when you turn a community resilient and you respond to basic needs, you will earn more money than you spend. That doesn't mean you have to pay it as a dividend. In nearly all the organizations I'm involved in, we don't pay dividends, and profits stay in the community. Keep on going back. Because I don't believe in banks. I don't believe in lending and borrowing money. So what we have is that money is being generated because that means you're doing good. So I think that the generation of money through activities is a good thing. But if there is more money generated, it's flowed back into the activities. It's not... I mean, I always wondered, why do you have shareholders who have a great management team, great staff that makes good money, and then take the money out of them? Isn't it better that they reinvest in what they're doing good? So I believe that money should stay in the community where it is and circulate faster and more. Not all investors think that way, but the ones I work with, that's the only way.
Are all people in your projects all over the world thinking the same way, as you said now? It's not so that more money, more successful community, and some people are thinking, oh, I want to Porsche or something.
Oh, there are always a few of those. Of course you always have a few of those. I mean, what will the world be without them? Because you don't wake up and say, oh no, that's not what I want. So you always have people who are also like that.
But start says, and in this community, make
There's
some...
no... Minorities are always respected and they have the right to exit. But you know, in none of our communities, everyone, and no one has a Porsche. We don't think that you need to show your capabilities in life by driving a car that goes faster than any permit in the world. So I think we have some... There are people who may be tempted, and I think temptation is great. Don't give in. And if you give in, not for too long. You know, I mean, this is life. It's not perfect, but most of the people are very much in line And the people who have invested in our projects, this is perhaps the most important, none of them otherwise will not accept it, go along those lines, except what we've just described. None.
It's just so human behavior. As I asked my first question about Soviet Union. In Soviet Union it was a very good idea, approximately the same as you told, that everyone has employment, everyone is owner of all what we have, ta-ta-ta, no, you know better. And after that, part of people were more equal as others, and so on, after it finished, like it finished. How it's possible in these your models to prevent that something like this don't happen?
I'm not trying to prevent. I think that that would be too much for me and others. I think in the end of the day, we slowly but steadily get some kind of a DNA. You know, it's kind of like what people think is right. And the only way I could explain it is come with us to Gaviotas and see it. Come to Songhai and see it. Because if you see it, then you're kind of realizing that, oh.
I believe, I think if you will cultivate these models, especially here in Europe, as you said, our mind is ruined with these ideas that you must be more successful, more tra-ta-ta-ta-ta. All these models are very inspiring, but if somebody starts to make it with some group of people and one of them start to think, they are working all, I must be a little bit successful more or have more, and then all the system get ruined.
I'm always happy that someone is different. It's the cohesion of the group is not by just the ideas and the philosophy. The cohesion is in the group is what you do. Huh? In French we say, je n'ai pas seulement besoin des rêveurs, j'ai besoin des faiseurs. I don't only need people who dream, I need people who do. And you know, if you stay with the dreaming, it's very easy this happens. But if you are with the doers, there's no way to escape. This is going to be the way it's done, because if you don't do it that way, it's not going to work. And maybe I can submit, if in one person's life, I've been involved in 5, well, you can do that as well. Anyone can do that, if you decide this is what you want to do. And of course, with whom are you going? With those who decided this is what we're going to do. But the word is do. The word is not, I've decided. No. We've decided to do. And this is where too many people are stuck, because they don't get to the doing. And doing you never do on your own, it's always doing together. So, and together is, as I said, by diversity. A last question or two. These two have already asked a question. Anyone who hasn't asked a question yet? Please.
What's your favorite species of fungi?
Oh, Ganoderma lucidum. Reishi. In Chinese, Lingsu. Yeah.
And how many languages do you speak?
I can do what I did today in 7.
Excellent.
That's 7 worlds in my mind.
Oh my God.
You know, every language you learn is
It's a new
another world.
Yeah.
But the language I really want to learn now is the language of the whales. I've learned lately that the whales speak different languages in different oceans. They have 40 syllables. Some languages they have 42 syllables. And they can speak to each other. And I have put in my mind that actually if I ever get the chance, I want to learn to know the whale language from the Indian Ocean. Because the sperm whales are so fantastic there. I would love to have a talk with them. And that would make me very happy. But I haven't found a teacher yet.
siis ma küsin eesti keeles, et mis on koostöötoit, millest koostöö saab uut tuld?
But Estonian I don't speak.
No, it's possible. Keegi paneb selle.
Koostöötoit.
No millest koostöö saab, tähendab...
How to create...
What is the food of working together?
Cooperation. What is with what you feed cooperation in with what food you feed cooperation?
But cooperation is more.
If there is some lack of cooperation, or if there is not going so,
yeah.
If it's
well, first of all, you need to have a shared dream. You know, dreams are only valuable when you share them. I mean, keeping dreams for yourself are secrets. We don't want secrets, we want shared dreams first. And the dreams, in my view, start with needs that are not fulfilled, like in Gaviotas, 70% of the people suffer from gastrointestinal diseases. The dream is no more diseases, you know. So we have to start with something that is commonly recognized. And then people will work together. People will never agree on what do we do now. No. That's the discussion. Once you start doing, everyone agrees. Because the secret in getting cooperation is to focus on doing, implementing. And around implementation, you always have people who will join you. Particularly if it starts with a dream. You know, and then you have to make certain that it keeps on going, but not more of the same. This is the problem in many communities. You start, you're successful, and you do more of the same. No! When you're successful, at the most successful moment, change. New focus, other dreams. You know, it's very important. You don't try to have one dream for that whole life. It's different things all the time, because we evolve. And then you pull in people, and some people will go, and other people will join. But the secret word is just in English 2 letters. Do. D-O. Do. If you do, then you are like, I may say, a magnet. Because people like to be around people who make things happen. You know, this is the sickness of Europe. Illness of Europe. The sickness of Europe is we talk so much and we do so little.
Just do it.
Just do it. Don't talk about it. Do it.
Hakka rääkima, just do it.
Let's do it. I mean, you know, you remember the movie with Tom Hanks where he started the walking. And then he realized, oh, people are walking. Oh yeah, he's walking. Let's all walk, you know. And then he said, oh, I stopped walking. And everyone, oh, okay, he stopped walking. What we need to do is walk. In English, there's a beautiful term. Walk the talk. You know, what you're saying, do it. And if we remain in Europe as the culture of the talkers and the philosophers and those who tell the world how the world should be run, two last questions, right? One for you, one for you.
Yeah, what is the level of personal ownership in those communities?
Depends on what they decide. In Rompan, everyone has their plot of land. In Montfort Boys Town, it's owned by a community. In Songhai, it is owned by a religious community. In Gaviotas, it is owned by a foundation. I think we have one common denominator. It's not owned by a corporation. You know? But what's the need of having a corporation? You need to get things done. And so to me, corporations are not always the most efficient. But we have quite a few corporations in and around, but they're not the overall surfer of the initiative.
Yeah, thank you. I find personally value-based model very interesting, and as a happiness, as a major weight in transaction. That's also what Jacques Presley, or describing. But do you agree? Did I get it right? So you say that this model framework is actually utopistic idea in capitalistic society with the fiat currencies and high population density and stuff, and today's market. That was the first question, and second, small.
Let me just respond to that. I don't care what the system is. I absolutely don't care a goddamn bit. I'm doing mine, and I know it's working. Not just for me, but for quite a few other people. That's all. I'm not here to convert the world from that system to this system. No, I leave that to someone else to imagine. I am there to imagine a community per community. Every time we just do it. And we do different ways, different circumstances, different contexts, different projects, different, but every time it's very clear. We don't care what the world thinks and says. We don't care that there is billionaires and there is capital and there is power and there is Monsanto, and I don't care. I don't care about all these heads of state meeting and deciding about the future. I don't care about M1, M2, M3, the money volumes. I don't care. We need to come back to basics. Basics in life is taking care of basic needs, is resilience in communities. That's what we need. We need resilience. We need the common good, the good for everyone. That's what we need. And if the others don't do it, that's fine. So we need to try to avoid becoming the apostles and the popes, where we know, and so everyone should do this. No. Let's just take care of what we can take care of. And the beauty of it is that out of our program with Gaviotas, there are dozens of initiatives that have come around, and we never even had to make an effort to do it. Because there's something important when you walk the talk. People are inspired. That's why I said, no franchise, no follow the rule, no 10 ways to be happy. No. And that's why I'm saying it's not a model. I look for the framework conditions that could lead to happiness and health. And I can add 5, 6 cases where it has happened. That's all. But you need to look at the framework conditions. I don't want to use the word model. We are no model. I am no model. But we have framework conditions that seem to work for those who do.
In third world,
Sweden, Spain, I didn't talk about the Spain case. We have. If it's impossible, it takes a little longer. You just have to have it in your mind. It's here. If it's possible, do it. If it's impossible, it takes a little bit longer. But who said impossible is impossible? If you decide it's impossible, it is impossible. Because your mind said it is impossible. If you say it is possible...
And last question to you as an economist. What's your personal opinion on this global income, when everyone gets like 1,500, whatever, to cover the basic needs?
Why don't you go for communism then? Why don't you go for communism? Leave a little bit of freedom for people to get out of their nest as well. Have an incentive, move in life. Everyone minimum? No, I would say not the minimum income, because that's again a very monetary approach. We don't need to give people money. You need to give people inspiration to be able to do what they can do with what they have in them. So learn how to discover what you have in you. And you're full of opportunities. That's exactly what we're doing in France. 20 cities, talk to people so they can discover what can we do. And after 24 hours, people say, wow, too much to choose from. Great, priorities now. Let's choose the 1, 2, 3 with which you do what? Start tomorrow. Tomorrow. Not, oh, the great idea, let's now write a plan for the future and no strategic plans, none of that. Do. What do you do tomorrow? Well, maybe tonight. Well, I'm going to have a little dinner with Avi. Maybe she thought about it.
The shortest question, when the book comes out?
I don't know, in Estonian, I think...
in for your first language, what?
Estonian?
No.
English will be, you mean the economy of happiness?
Yeah.
In English, it will be on the website as soon as Avi is ready with the Estonian edition. I want the English and the Estonian to come out together.
Oh.
Yeah, why not? I don't know who told me, but probably it's Avi spoke to me one night when I was asleep and said, let me get the Estonian edition or so. But I think, I have always wanted books to be published at the same time in several languages. Because you touch different worlds. And I don't think the English language should be the first. The first edition will be French and Estonian. Thank you so much for bearing with me. I don't know how you do with your body system, but none of you had to go to the toilet. Do you use dry toilets before you came here, or? Good night, all of you. Thank you for coming. Thank you.